All right, so listen, what you're about to see here is just some snapshots first of what I started doing here this morning. I had to solve that issue with the frame, the band I did on the field, around the field of this walnut table I'm working on, which is a pedestal table. And it was kind of a mistake I made to a certain extent. Like if I was doing this again and thinking it out, if I was more focused, I would have taken those parts and I would have made 2 long slots on the hollow chisel mortiser. That would have held things together. Instead, what I did is I ran them down on the table saw and I created a channel. And what happened was the wood left over after I took the center out, they pinched down a little bit. So what I had to do was make some blocks and shim it open again so that when I went to glue it up around the field, it was the same at the same surface there. So that's what these pictures are. You'll see I used some pine in there to make that happen, and everything worked out great. And then I glued it up, and then at the end of the video, I'm going to follow it up with, probably talk for another 20 minutes or so. At that point, you guys know me. So that's what's happening with these images. There's some pictures in there as well of different types of wood. I think there's purple heart, cherry, African mahogany, which is not real mahogany, and some Macassar ebony, I think, is what I have in there as far as different types of butterfly mortises. And I'm pretty certain that my client, Andrew, is going to go with the purple heart. That's what I think looks the best in this case. So enjoy this, and let me know what you think down there, underneath the thing there. I know you're going to tell me anyhow, whether I want you to or not. Stick around. All right, so I had this issue where I cut this channel out of here to fit over this tongue I made. Problem was that it pinched on me. It's 1.5 inches deep, so it rounded in and pinched. And I tried to give enough room for the glue, but that was enough where it was a little shallow here. I was going to make a ramp here, but what I decided to do is make these shims here that I'll pop in, and now you'll see, you should be able to see, it's straight now. All right. If I look at it here, you'll see a gap of light right here. See that? So this needs to be pushed out in that direction, and that's what this will do. So what I'll end up doing is I'll put one of these on each end and maybe one in the middle, or possibly 2, and then I'll just channel out where those little shims are in this tongue, and then when I put it on there, it'll be closer to flush here. Make my life a lot easier. I'm just going to do that right now, and then we'll see. I'm going to talk to my client about the width on this, and if he's cool with it, we're done. I would prefer, to leave these parts on the outside and give it a little shape, because I really like this ribbon grain here. It's so pretty. However, if he wants me to make it a little bit wider at the little bump out that I want to do, I do have a little bit of scrap here. The only issue with the scrap is none of it doesn't match like what's on there now. Again, this nice ribbon here, which I really, really like. Yeah. That's what's happening. All right, so I'm glued up here, and it went okay. I'm massaging it a little bit to smooth this out a little with the cabinet scraper. I'm nice and tight, that's the most important thing. I'll be able to swell some things out with some water and just keep moving. I would say my only issue I got, like on this side here, it goes slightly high. On this side over here, it goes slightly low. I've been trying to correct that. I can massage this a little bit. These are all things that when the thing is done, you wouldn't know, most people wouldn't notice these things that I point out. I was just speaking with my client about this. I'll give you a little talk up on that. So yeah, as I was saying, it's a funny thing. My favorite jobs are the ones where people are just, here, take the money, let me know when it's done. Nobody's rushing you or anything. And by the way, this client's not rushing me. But initially he wanted this top to be a certain dimension. And the way that things worked out, with the angles and everything else, I ended up getting a little bit smaller. I still think it's large enough. And one of my big concerns has always been on a pedestal table. Your top is so big. You got your pedestal, you got your base. You can compensate. There are pedestal tables, usually big round ones, like big oak tables that you'll have in a kitchen. But they're usually a table height. They're usually about 29 inches tall. And even with those, the single pedestal on those things are massive, and the legs are massive. And this guy is he's tall. He's like 6'4" or something like that. And this is going to be bar height. We don't have a determination yet. I think it's going to be about 40 to 42 inches on the height on this. We'll figure that out. That's still to be determined. But because it's taller, you want to be careful about that. This could be a 5-foot top at 42 inches, but the base would have to be so massive, you'd basically be tripping on it. You want your base to be inside the perimeter of this top still, but still be able to support it. So that's going to be a weight thing as well. So the timbers for the foot on this are much more massive. But it was funny because I had mentioned to this guy, his name's Andrew. I'll just start calling him by his name, Andrew. I mentioned to Andrew that what I like about what we have going on here is, I don't know if you guys can see it here. I'll try to get you a good angle here. I'm going to zoom in for a moment. You see this here? This is a nice ribbon grain. I think that's beautiful. And that pretty much matches on all four sides. So what I want to do is I'd like to leave that, which means I don't want to add anything to this. All right. I mentioned to Andrew today that I could add material to this. I have a little bit of scrap. I could glue something on here and then bow this out a bit. I could add at least 3/4 of an inch to each side, which would make this 1.5 inches wider at the center. But when it tapered, it would pretty much come down to right where we're at now. But if I do that, it's just not going to be as attractive. So I'm just showing, right now all I'm doing with you guys now is kind of talking this out so you understand some of the stuff that goes on with this process, right? So if I glued that on, it's not going to have as nice of a ribbon on there. And each one of these is a little bit different. And right now this matches. I prefer to leave this. And I still think that at this size, let me see what you can see here. To me, it seems to me like 4 people could still sit and eat at this. Now, it's not a giant dining room table, but you can see me here at this, and I could clearly have a plate sitting here. And, boom, there could be 4 plates here without any problems. There's still a little bit of room for something in the center. Keeping in mind, this is a bar height pedestal table. It's not supposed to be some big giant thing. So, these were just things that were coming up in my conversation with Andrew today. And it's funny because I bring up the little things that are on my mind at that moment that really don't mean anything. In the end, he used a phrase which is great. It's like, I trust you, use your discretion. And that's typically what I would do. And I normally wouldn't include a client in on this part of the discussion. But I had to bring it up because I ended up being smaller than what the client had originally given me in his notes. Not by much. I think he said 36 to 40 or 38 to 40 in that range is what he wanted. And we're a little under 38 inches basically. So I'm still pretty close to those parameters. But those were also numbers that he was just guessing on. It's not like he builds furniture. So when we're talking about, I don't know, less than about, let's say it's 3/4 of an inch that I missed the parameter by. In this case, 3/8 of an inch extra on this is not going to gain you much extra room for 4 people to sit here. So I don't think it matters. I think I'm going to just want to keep this ribbon grain on there because it's so pretty. And if I was to glue something else on here, I think it's going to change the look because you'll see that little bump out. And I'm still going to shape this. I never wanted to give it too dramatic of a curve. So in a way, this kind of helps me because I basically want to come right to this edge and not have to take anything off of that. And just bring it in here 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch tinier, a little bit on the corners. I think it'll be just enough. I want it to have just enough of a curve for your eye to catch it and for it to be interesting. But I don't want to have a big pillow type shape on this. I think that could be too much, you know, because you're not going to see that anywhere else on the table. But anyhow, this is all going to work out good. Also, while I have you here, we were talking, I think that we're probably going to end up going with Purple Heart on the butterflies. I happen to have a bunch that I've pre-made already, so they're going to sit right in here like that. And I've done videos on how I do my butterfly mortises, but when I do them for this table, which would likely be tomorrow, I will shoot video on that, all right? So you guys can see that. And it's a serious thing. It's a real process, but the puzzle piece is made. I have to make the negative space so this fits in as precisely as I can. And I'm pretty good at it. I've done it hundreds and hundreds of times. The funny thing is, I mentioned to Andrew today that I used the term that this has fought me. This has been fighting me a little bit. The reason for that is because I haven't been 100% focused on it. I haven't been 100% focused on it because of all the other stuff that's been going on. And it's not the way to do furniture. I mean, when you're doing a piece of furniture, you really should have nothing else on your mind. And it's funny because some of my friends, I got a few people have been reaching out to me the last couple of days. I got to call them back, 3 or 4 guys, because they knew I had a friend in from out of town, and so I wasn't talking to anybody at that time. But now they want to catch up. But the thing is I still don't have time for that because I really, really, really have to work on this. I have to work on getting this finished. I'll be in a better place and be able to catch up and think about other things once these butterfly mortises are in. I've massaged this enough and I've got this sanded pretty well, because the base on this and the cross members I got to make, that's pretty straightforward stuff. In 2 days I should have that part done and sanded out and ready to go. So this was the hard part. And now that this part's done, I'm very close to being finished completely. And I still haven't decided what I want to do with this edge. So after I sand it out, there's a chance, and I could have done it beforehand, but I was nervous about my clamping. I wanted to have enough surface here for purchase with the clamps. But I'm considering a long chamfer here, basically leaving something like a 1/2 inch here, and from there coming down on an angle about 2 to 3 inches on an angle, a bevel down, which is the way I would do that is pretty kooky, because I would probably just set the table saw blade to that angle and just do my best at holding that pretty straight. And I know that's scary to some people, but I could do it. It doesn't have to be super perfect, because then I'll massage it with the belt sander and scrapers and everything else, and when I'm done, it'll look right. It's a funny thing about this sort of stuff. I was very precise when I did all this milling, and it's still not 100%, right? Like I mentioned. But it's more about it feeling right and looking good, right? If you were to put a flat edge, a straight edge on solid wood tables, regardless of how much money they cost, you're going to find weird little imperfections. And things move, and when you have grain going in different directions and everything else, over time, there's going to be a little movement here and there. That's okay. That's the beauty of solid wood. That's the difference between taking your time, doing your joinery, getting this sort of thing done, knowing that that's the beauty of it. Is you have doesn't matter how bad. If let's say you totally screw something up, or as you're milling the lumber, some voids appear, you can always glue another piece of wood in and make it right. Versus, you know, plywood and veneers. If you use plywood and veneers, you can make everything dead flat, and it's going to look really cool. It's a lot of steps involved, but as I've mentioned before, if you really live with it, let's say you have kids or something, or you like to drink and you're like slamming stuff down or whatever, you can easily get veneers to peel up or break apart, or if you drop something hard on it and it chips a veneer away on a corner. A lot of you right now are shaking your heads because you know what I'm saying. In agreement. Once you bust a veneer apart, that's a thing, you know, and you could patch that, you could fix it if you know what you're doing, but you would have to really bring that to somebody. Versus if you do this, let's say you get some weird thing that hits your edge here, man, at home on your own, you can just take a hand plane to it, sand it, make it look right, look like $1 million again. So that's the beauty of solid wood. That's why it's been used for so long. But yeah, I'm pretty stoked with this part of it. This was a big deal. And let me see if I can get you a field shot of it. You know what? Hang on. I'll keep talking. I'm sure I'll think of something to say. Let me wet this down a hair and give you kind of an idea of what it'll look like when it's got some finish on it. Keeping in mind, I know I did this already, I think, but keep in mind it's going to change. Your finish might have a bit of a tint to it, even if it is clear. In particular, if it's thinner base like what I use a wipe-on polyurethane from Minwax, and I use the thinner based stuff, not the water based. The water base can have a bluishness to it, or it can be totally clear. And I like when there's a slight bit of a warmth that's added with the clear finish. That's my personal preference. And so oh, sorry, that might have been too close up on my face for that whole part of the discussion. So it's not exact, but it's pretty close. Let me bust out one of these. Hang on. So yeah, I think the Purple Heart is the way to go. I'm going to wet this real quick. You can kind of see that Purple Heart, the cool thing about Purple Heart is over time it gets pretty dark. And he mentioned to me today, Andrew did, about that. He's like, can we get something dark? And I also think that the Purple Heart just looks really good with the Walnut. That's just me, but that's just what I believe. Here's this ribbon here on the edge. We'll just wet this down for you. You can see what I'm talking about with how beautiful that ribbon grain is there. So it's really going to be something special when it's done. So yeah, another quick short video just on the glue up. I don't mind doing these short videos and showing you the progress of, you know, what I'm doing. A lot of people would just wait till the end, or they're going to give you a how-to on something. But as I've mentioned before, if this is your first time here, if you're seeing me work on a project and you see me do a short video like this, most of the time, even though I know a lot of you enjoy this, it's really so I can send a link to my client. So you can see, oh, he's finally back working on it. You know, I gave this guy money a while ago. What the hell's going on? Well, you can see what I'm doing. There's a lot going on. And, you know, I want them to see the progress. It's funny. I'm very honest about everything in my life. So there's not too many people when they're working on a project that are going to include you in on every step of the way and post pictures on a Facebook page or something, so you can see at the end of the day what they did. There's not a lot of people who, hang on a moment, as I was saying, there's not a lot of craftsmen out there who are going to talk about things during the process that might seem like, depending on the words that they're using, might make it seem like, oh, things aren't super perfect. It's probably not smart to do that, to be honest with you. But I can't help it. It's just what's going on in my mind at the moment. The one thing I have going for me is decades of producing high-end furniture pieces. So all they got to do is look at what I've done. And every single piece I ever did, I went through the same thing with it, where I'm questioning myself sometimes. The biggest mistake I make now is, it's not an overconfidence, but because I've been doing it for so long, I don't think before as much as I used to. I used to overthink it before. There was a time when the night before, I couldn't sleep because I was nervous about what I was going to do the next day. And then every cut, I was nervous about every single cut. And now I don't worry about it. I just start working. And if something doesn't go right, I adjust things. Sometimes I just incorporate that into the design. Sometimes, like on this one, I might have done something that resulted in this being a little bit shorter. You know, so I'm just like, okay, well, that's okay. Or sometimes something's too big, or sometimes there's like there's some crack that I didn't notice in the wood, and I've got to shape that a certain way, but all of a sudden that becomes like a better design. I kind of let things happen to a certain extent that it's almost like, again, I say this sounds corny, but it's kind of like the universe is making it happen a little bit, and that's the way I like it to happen. I've had a few projects I did back in the day through designers, and that was always a hassle because they were very, very specific about things. Problem is, that was the designer. And designers, 97 times out of 100, they're not going to let you talk to the client. They're playing the middleman, so I don't work for designers anymore. I learned this lesson in the 90s still. They don't want you to meet the client. They try to get me or any craftsman to do the work as cheap as possible. They want to control it. They want to micromanage it, and then they want to tack on their percentage on it. So they don't want the price to get too high for the client. But the reality is, if a good designer was there and they allowed me to speak with the client, I make them feel good about everything right off the bat and just convince them by showing the work. Hey, you're going to be happy in the end. It's going to be within your parameters, but there's like a plus minus here of certain things. But that's unimportant. The important part is when it's done, it's going to be a work of art. If you nail somebody down trying to get things to like the 16th of an inch or something, when it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, it's not worth the aggravation there. So I don't know how this sounds. This might sound like a bunch of BS to somebody, but it's the truth. And yeah, pretty happy with this. Maybe some, like I said, a little more massaging with the scraper and some sanding, and then I'll get these butterfly mortises in. I'm going to let this sit overnight. It's 3:15. Normally I don't always do that, but I'm nervous a little bit. I did a little something different here. I didn't use any biscuits on the field. I don't typically do that. I probably could have used biscuits here on this piece, or even here at the corners. The reason I didn't do it is because I know we're doing this. And again, this is for those of you that don't know, this is called a butterfly mortise. It kind of people will call it a bow tie. So what this will do is two opposing triangles, right? Once I put this in here, this joint can never separate. It can't come apart. So once these butterfly mortises are set in and they're flush, this can't come apart. And as you guys know, there's 1.5 inches of a tongue here on this table going into the frame out here. That's locked in. That can't go anywhere. So again, once this is in here, it's going to be golden. And then this little knot right here, I might show this to you. It's not super important. I mentioned this in a previous video. In the old days, I would do a Dutchman patch, but when it's tight like this, what I'll do is I'll take some thin wood, some walnut probably. It'd be fun to do with different colors, but I'll take some walnut and I'll put some glue in here, and I'll hammer that in, all right, into these cracks. And then I'll sand that smooth, and so you'll still see this, which I like when it's a nice tight one like this. I actually like that. If you do a Dutchman patch, you see the Dutchman patch. And I don't want to lose this. I think this is really neat looking. I think that's kind of beautiful. So that's it. Another Walnut tabletop video. You getting tired of this yet? Thanks for being here. Be good to one another. I will catch you in the next one, which will probably be tomorrow. You guys will see the butterfly mortises then.